Welcome to today's webinar, Improving Inconsistent Producers. This is Pat Sherlock. My story is that my company helps firms such as yourself improve their identification and development of their loan officers. We're science-based, and what we're doing today is sharing our research on best practices in the issue of how to improve inconsistent loan officers. What we're going to cover today is a variety of different topics, starting out with who are these players, who are the inconsistent producers, what do the B players need, the right structure, what are the three keys, best practices, and today's takeaways. So let's talk about who are the inconsistent producers. And this is really obviously a hot topic in mortgage banking, especially as the market has become more difficult. We'll go over what we would define as the groups of what essentially loan officers are graded by performance levels. The A players are your superstars. They're the talented individuals. They're motivated. They are really the individuals that represent the top 10% of your performance level. On the other hand, when you look at C players, they never or rarely hit the budgeted goal numbers. C players really don't have the talent for origination. They basically are your order takers, and they are individuals that are fit for a customer service rep position. The B players are the frustrating ones. The B players are individuals that have the right talent. In other words, they have the right sales DNA for origination, but they're comfortable, they're satisfied. They may even be individuals that are very experienced or former top producers back in the day. So B players are different than the underperformers because these individuals have the talent, but for personal reasons, they are not A players. Let me repeat that because it's really an important concept when we look at how we're going to improve them. B players, again, are different from underperformers, but for personal reasons, they are not your A players currently. Ryan Leaf in the sports world was a perfect example of someone that was a B player and really had the talent, but for whatever reason wasn't able to make it happen. They're probably your most frustrating individuals to deal with, but this is the issue of how do you correct it so you can improve your performance. So what do B players need? It's not an issue of them not having talent. It's more of an issue that they need structure. So in the past, the B players, maybe because they were very successful, but today they are not. B players won't improve on their own, and that's really wishful thinking on managers' part that assumes that the B player is the person that's just going to essentially become an A player. That rarely happens because, again, these are individuals with the talent, but for whatever personal reasons, they have elected to be comfortable. So when you look at that as a manager, your best strategy isn't to cajole them. It really is a better strategy to install structure so these individuals will be able to perform and improve their production. Well, what is the right structure? I mean, that's obviously the real issue. And there's three keys that I would really suggest. Now, what we see from our research and our consulting practice is that what works with a B player. The first part of the right structure is identifying the right accounts, and I'll talk about that in a second. Second is defining a prospecting method. Again, I'll speak a little bit more about that. And organizing the face-to-face interaction or the sales calls. So the right structure is being really an issue of you incorporating these three components of what the B player really needs to follow. So let's look at identifying the right accounts. The truth of the matter is, we all know this, and certainly your A players know this, that not all opportunities are created equal. So it is an issue that what you often see with B players is they're often prone to working hard, but on a few accounts. And they're certainly not prospecting enough, which can lead them to, frankly, become a C player eventually. That's where you as a manager has to step in, and that's where the structure component comes into play. So the identification process for them, for example, it gets down to the issue of identifying and almost assigning accounts of who you want them to call on, which agent or agencies. Letting the loan officer that is a B player make that determination really is fraught with problems for the obvious reason that they're not prospecting enough to be successful and become an A player. So again, because of market conditions, these individuals might have been very successful in the past, but that isn't working today. And sometimes what happens with the B players, they really are not current on what it takes to originate in today's market. I had a conversation with an executive last week talking about an individual that was, again, the classic top performer. He was doing $35 million a year, but when it really came to prospecting, he wasn't prospecting, and he said to the manager that he really didn't know what to do with real estate agents. Again, the need for structure is really what has to be addressed with that type of person, because again, it's not that they don't know the products or they don't know the guidelines. It's an issue of the identifying of right accounts is a problem for them, and your best bet is to install a systematic approach. So when you look at the second issue that is important from a structure standpoint, it's really defining the prospecting method. When we've done this for companies, a lot of times what this boils down to is putting what we would call a prospecting playbook together. It's almost like a how-to guide for prospecting, which would include your best practices regarding social media, your referral generation, and offline prospecting targets. What really works in the market today, again, your B player has the talent, but the structure component is missing, and this is what you need to do as a manager, is to incorporate it. So what's in this playbook? It's, again, very practical information of what is currently working in your marketplace. I would tell you that it makes sense, and what we see works is really a quarterly update of the latest techniques. So we're not talking about a playbook that sits there and is never used. We are talking about putting together practical tips and, in other words, sequence that they need to follow in order to become successful. Assuming, again, because these individuals can be very experienced, that doing your own thing is going to work, it doesn't really work in the real world, and that's the point of why you need to have structure. So first of all, you need the structure on identifying the accounts. The second part is what is the prospecting methodology that the individual needs to use. And the third part, I think, will be surprising for many of you. It's really organizing the face-to-face meeting. You know, in our industry, for sure, we have many individuals that have over 20 years experience, but the truth of the matter is that experience is not really relevant today, mainly because of the issue that what has changed dramatically is people's attention span. So what might have worked before, and it was quite common in any type of sales call, that you were talking about that anyone would give you 60 minutes or so for you to make a presentation. Well, research is showing for sure over and over again that the sales process works much different today, that 70% of the buyer's process has really been addressed before they even contact you. So when you have your first face-to-face meeting, that's your most important time to really demonstrate your value proposition and to essentially reinforce that this is that you are the knowledgeable, trusted advisor that they're looking for. It tells you that the face-to-face meeting really needs to be planned, designed, and practiced. So again, with individuals that have many years of experience, this is all new for them because they hadn't had to do it in the past. But today, the reality of it is that you need to do it in order to make sure when you are contacted that you're able to close the deal and to move the transaction to the next level of your sales process. So in short, the three structures that need to be in place is identifying the right accounts, putting in place a prospecting playbook, and finally, organizing that face-to-face meeting. If you want to improve inconsistent producers, you have to address those three issues and not just let the individual kind of do a trial and error method at the end, what ends up happening with these individuals is that B players, your folks with the talent, but not being able to be successful today, are individuals that can become C players very quickly without a structure. So what are the 5 takeaways from a practical standpoint that you can incorporate today? First off is to grade your originators, to identify the personal knowledge gaps and where they need help. Your A players are pretty simple to identify. They're typically going to be your top 10% individuals. For more information about that grading method, certainly go to my website, and on previous podcasts we discussed how do you do the gradings and what that all means. The second part is that individuals that are B players, you really have to establish a marketing targeting list and assign it to them and ensure that those are followed. The third part is really using the best practices for prospecting and make that a continual update. What worked 10 years ago, 5 years ago, doesn't work today. Again, the loan officer needs to be a lot more sophisticated in their prospecting. As we all know, individuals don't answer their phone anymore and really are doing prior research before they reach out and make a contact to you. So you have to be on your toes with the prospecting component, which also dovetails that how you conduct client meetings has got to change in a dramatic way, because the client meetings are not as much information searching as they were in the past. What the individual is doing, whether they're a referral source or a customer, is trying to figure out, is your value proposition something that they're interested in, because they've already done prior information searching on their own. And finally, as managers, this whole issue of measuring and inspecting and holding the loan officer accountable for following the structured activities is really a key success factor if you want to turn around the individual's performance. It's usually an early indicator when they're not following the structure that this is an individual on the road to being a C player, and obviously that's an indication for you not to invest any more time. So structure is what improves B players. It's important for you as managers to recognize that letting them do their own thing in this new world of origination doesn't really work, and the importance of having a structured sales process is very clear, and certainly what I would suggest that you need to put in place today. Let's open it up for any questions that can be through the chat feature down on the right-hand side. I'd be glad to answer any that you might have about what was discussed. We have one from John. He says, how many B players does a good sales team have? Great question, John. The truth of the matter is that typically your top 10 to 20% would be your A players. And obviously what's interesting about that is the top 1% are significantly more important than obviously at the 10 and 20% range. But your A players typically are at those levels. Your C players in a good organization is somewhere around 10%. So your B players can be a majority of your people, so anywhere from 60 on. So the reality is that putting structure in place is very important for you as an organization, because these are the individuals that, again, have the talent, but they need the structure to be successful today. And otherwise, you end up going down the route of trying to support B players with price concessions and product niches, which in the long term may not make sense for your organization. But great question. In many organizations, obviously, it's a large percentage. And the idea that the B player will become an A player is many times wishful thinking, because what the real issue is, these are talented people, but they need a structure component to compete in today's competitive sales origination. So that was a great question, John. And I have another question from Joan. Would a producer or a producer that is a B player leave you because of the structure? It's another great question. I find that many companies, this is the issue, that the manager is very much afraid if they put structure in place that the supposedly experienced person will not like that and leave your organization. But by definition, a B player can become a C player because of market conditions, and it's in the interest of the company to really look at this in a big picture. If the person's not willing to follow the structure, that's an early indication of a future C player. So in one aspect, I would tell you that the structure will be welcomed by certainly many of them that obviously want to have better production numbers. But there will be a percentage of B players that they just won't do it. And that's an early sign for you regarding your future investment of your own time and resources. So as a whole, what is ending up happening, I think, in the industry today is many of these B players do want the structure and are looking for that guidance. And so the percentage that would resist it certainly varies, but it would be a sign of that person not really willing to compete in today's marketplace. They were great questions. We have some resources for you that I want to just kind of recommend. Certainly you can check out our Mortgage Manager Playbook. We do have ebooks on there, and we are constantly adding. We are looking to add, many of you have asked for kind of what I call VIP coaching packages. Certainly email me and I can talk to you about that.